problem is this could open up other fissures, other holes, other gaps, and you have not just one leaking fire hydrant of oil, you have many leaking fire hydrants of oil, all of which have to be capped, all of which have to have a top kill, and we start all over again.
All right, back live, everybody. That's our science guru, Mikio Kaku, urging against the use of a nuclear device, well, let me just say, an atomic bomb to seal off the well that since about noon today has been gushing oil absolutely unhindered as those robotic submarines working a mile deep have removed the old leaking cap in the hopes that another bigger, better cap will succeed with the 6 or 7 previous caps failed. Why not cut to the chase? What are we going to do if this new cap or even those long-awaited relief wells don't work? Here's Craig on whether or not the time has finally come.
Geraldo, with 60,000 barrels of oil still spilling into the Gulf, many people are looking for extreme options to seal that well, one of them being to nuke it. I'm with Milo Nordyke. Milo is actually one of the masterminds behind U.S. research into the use of peaceful nuclear options. Milo, do you really think it's possible to nuke that well and seal it?
Yes, I would say on the experience we have and the experience the Russians have, it certainly looks like it would be quite possible.
The government estimates as much as 100 million gallons of oil have spewed into the Gulf of Mexico since the explosion and fire of the Deepwater Horizon rig on April 20th. The history of BP's failed attempts to plug the well has some people talking about extreme measures to stop the spill. Former President Bill Clinton.
Unless we send the Navy down deep to blow up the well and cover the leak with piles and piles and piles of rock and debris, which may become necessary.
How would you actually consider going about putting a nuke into the ocean bottom to seal that well?
Well, you're not putting it in the ocean bottom. You're putting it 10,000 feet below the ocean bottom. And you would do that in a well, something like the relief wells.
Nordyke says, unlike conventional explosives, a nuke would fit into the limited space of a relief well.
The device has to be designed to withstand high pressures and high temperatures, because that's what we're dealing with here.
Nuclear explosives for large projects that are simply not feasible with conventional methods. They call their program Plowshare.
Nordyke is a veteran of Operation Plowshare, a team of American nuclear physicists from the Lawrence Livermore National Lab in California, who during the Cold War actually conducted nuclear tests for practical use of the devices, like digging a new Panama Canal.
Rio Blanco was 3 explosions at 7,000 feet, and very similar to the depth that we're talking about for this.
The Russians claim they used nukes successfully 4 out of 5 times to close out-of-control wells, like this one in Uzbekistan, that burned for 3 years until it was put out with a massive explosion.
The camera feels the impact of the detonation.
Milo visited the site. Now, is this diagram what a nuclear device would look like, exploding underground and pushing this pipe over to the side? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, that's exactly right. Ultimately, the rock that's above the cavity will start to collapse.
And these are 2 books that you actually contributed to, and they're published by IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, and they're the ones that actually monitor the use of nukes around the world, right?
Yes, that's right.
Nordyke believes insignificant amounts of radiation would leak into the environment, and the seismic disturbance would be minimal. Critics of this plan say that a nuclear device would do nothing but blow up the entire reservoir of oil and completely destroy the Gulf.
Well, you'll not be in the reservoir, you're going to be above it.
Do you think it's a true possibility?
I think it's certainly a possibility, but again, I have to say it's only if the relief wells fail would you consider doing this as a last resort.
I got goosebumps. I really did. I thought about that. Fishing in the Gulf, Grandma's beach, Siesta Key, and nuke over the horizon. What do you think the chances are this could really happen?
I think based on the fear of a nuclear accident, radiation being released into the Gulf. And also creating an even greater environmental disaster, another oil well breaking as a result of the seismic wave or what have you, would make the chances slim to none.
But we think the Russians really did it?
Yeah, well, Nordyke actually did a study, a 100-page study, and found that 4 out of 5 experiments in turning off these Soviet wells actually worked. Now, there are Soviet environmentalists say that this is all a lie and he was given improper information, but that's what he's found.
Okay. Meet our expert. He's Lieutenant Christopher Brownfield, a former nuclear submariner. He's an Iraqi war veteran. He's currently a nuclear policy researcher at Columbia University. Chris, welcome aboard. So now, when President Clinton was talking about explosives, he was citing your op-ed pieces.
Yes, that's correct. He was talking about using conventional explosives, not nuclear ones.
So is that your solution, rather than a nuke with all of the emotional and physical and environmental potential catastrophes, use just like stacks and stacks of C4, dynamite, nitroglycerin, whatever?
Yes, essentially. What I've been arguing for the last 8 weeks, ever since May 16th, was to use conventional explosives to seal off this well. And the thing that's different about our situation now is that we have a lot more precise explosives and we have better technology than what the Russians had. So it shouldn't be necessary to use the wrecking ball. We could probably get away with a sledgehammer.
Now, do you think that it is a failure of presidential leadership that the explosives option is not on the table? That's my specific question. And B, because if it was, it would be the United States Navy in charge rather than the United States Coast Guard or British Petroleum.
Well, I think there are 2 important failures in leadership here. One was with Energy Secretary Stephen Chu, who said that the nuclear option was never on the table. I think they should have had it on the table, and they should have learned how the Soviets did this with a demolition from the side of the well. They could have realized, if they had looked at this, that it would be possible to seal off this well using conventional explosives and contemporary technology.
Well, I want to stop you there. Are you saying, as Craig said, that the Russians did use this explosive technology, but rather than nuclear, use conventional weapons, or was it nuclear in the case of the Soviet Union?
Well, the Soviet Union did use nuclear weapons to seal this off, but I think that with our better technology, we're a lot more precise. We can drill right up next to the leaking oil well. The Soviets didn't have that technology. So with our better technology, we should be able to do this using conventional explosives. Now, the other failure, I think, comes with President Obama, who was a little bit too trusting of the executives at BP, and they're a little bit too fearful of this greatly exaggerated threat of rupturing the oil reservoir. I think it's completely infeasible for any weapon, whether it's a 10-megaton nuclear weapon or conventional explosives, to rupture through a rock formation that's as thick as the Rocky Mountains are tall.
Now, one thing that Milo did tell me was that the reason that he says a nuke would work better is because you'd need a much smaller nuke in order to get down into this small area that you have down there. Conventional explosives, you would need massive amounts to go down to seal the well.
All right, let's check with our Jonathan Seary, who filed this report today, the real-life situation from Grand Isle, Louisiana, the ground zero.
BP has announced that 400 skimmers are stationed around the site of the leaking well to deal with what they anticipate will be additional amounts of oil after removing that initial cap on the well. The idea is that within the next 4 to 10 days, they're going to replace that cap with a newer cap, a tighter fit to fit that jagged pipe emanating from the well. They believe that if all goes well, they're going to be able to successfully siphon all of the leaking oil to ships on the surface. In other words, that no additional oil will leak out of that well. Of course, the situation won't be totally over until BP finishes drilling those 2 relief wells and is able to permanently patch the well with a mixture of cement and concrete. That may not happen until late July or the middle of August. In the meantime, as much as 171 million gallons of crude has already leaked into the Gulf. Much of that will eventually wash ashore. And so containment efforts continue. In fact, if you come back to my shot here, you can see all of the booming and fencing behind me. Even after the spill is contained and after the well is patched, sites like this are likely to be commonplace for the months ahead. Geraldo?
Jonathan Seary, thank you very much. I think it is absolutely appalling that the United States Navy is not in charge. You remember the Alvin, that cool submersible that we heard so much about? Why isn't the Alvin down there peeking over the shoulder of the BP submersibles so we know they're not jiving us about what they're really doing? Anyway, I want to thank Christopher Brownfield. Thank you very much, Lieutenant. Thank you for your service as well. I think the explosive option, maybe not the nukes, all right, let's put that aside for now, but the explosive option must be considered. I can't imagine that they're not thinking about that in the White House, or at least you know, at the Department of the Navy. Coming up, Chelsea mania hits the upstate New York hamlet of Rhinebeck.